As midnight approached, Ella found herself traveling alone on a train. The silence of the station and the gentle rocking of the train soothed her. However, despite the calmness inside the carriage, Ella felt a sense of unease. It was evident that she sensed the presence of a mysterious entity aboard the train. As the train departed from the station, Ella's discomfort grew. The empty seat beside her filled with an eerie silence, causing her heart to beat rapidly with concern. She kept her eyes fixed on the window, where the dark scenery and swiftly passing trees stirred a strange fear within her. After a while, Ella's attention was drawn to the shadows dancing outside the window. However, she noticed one shadow that stood out from the rest. It had a more distinct and humanoid form. Ella shuddered momentarily, but she reassured herself, attributing the strange occurrence to her imagination. As the train progressed, the atmosphere inside the carriage became increasingly tense. The disquieting silence of the other passengers began to unsettle Ella further. She felt the gaze of the passenger beside her directed towards her, and whispers and hurried murmurs filled her ears. Suddenly, the train entered a dark tunnel. Ella's heart tightened momentarily as she scanned her surroundings. She observed the other passengers in a state of panic, colliding with one another. Emergency lights began to flash, casting the carriage into a chaotic darkness. After a moment of hesitation, the train continued to speed towards a bridge. Ella's heart raced in her chest as the risk of the train derailing increased. Suddenly, the carriage hurtled off the bridge and plummeted into a deep abyss. Ella lost consciousness, enveloped by darkness once more. Emma, a young girl of 16, found herself alone at home for the first time in her life. Her parents had left for a week-long vacation, leaving her in charge of the house. At first, Emma was excited about the prospect of having the place to herself, but as the days passed, the excitement gave way to unease. The first night alone was relatively uneventful. Emma spent the evening watching movies and snacking on popcorn. But as midnight approached, she began to hear strange noises echoing through the house. At first, she dismissed them as the creaks and groans of an old house settling. But as the noises grew louder and more distinct, she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease creeping over her. The second night was even worse. Emma found it difficult to sleep, tossing and turning in her bed as the strange noises continued. It sounded like footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving through the empty rooms of the house. Emma's heart raced as she lay in bed, her imagination running wild with thoughts of intruders and ghosts. As she lay there, paralyzed with fear, Emma thought she heard her bedroom door creak open ever so slightly. She held her breath, straining her ears for any sound, but all she heard was the pounding of her own heart. Summoning all her courage, she finally mustered the strength to get out of bed and investigate. Steeling herself for what she might find, Emma crept slowly towards the door and pushed it open. The hallway outside was shrouded in darkness, but she could make out a faint figure standing at the end of the hall. It was too dark to see any details, but Emma could feel its eyes boring into her, filled with a malevolent intensity. Terrified, Emma stumbled back into her room and slammed the door shut, locking it behind her. She huddled under the covers, praying for morning to come quickly and banish the darkness that seemed to be closing in on her. But morning brought no relief. The strange occurrences continued, growing more frequent and more terrifying with each passing hour. Emma felt like she was losing her mind, trapped in a nightmare from which she couldn't wake. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, Emma made the decision to leave. She packed a bag with a few essentials and fled the house, not looking back as she ran into the safety of the daylight. As she stood outside, trembling and breathless, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something malevolent had been lurking in the shadows of her home. And as she watched the house from a safe distance, she knew she would never be able to forget the terror of those long, lonely nights alone. It was a dark and stormy night, the kind that sent shivers down your spine. Two young men, Jake and Ryan, found themselves stranded on a desolate stretch of road in the middle of nowhere. With no cars in sight and the rain pouring down, they were beginning to lose hope of reaching their destination. Just as they were about to give up, headlights appeared in the distance. Relief flooded over them as a car pulled up beside them. The driver, a middle-aged man with a friendly smile, rolled down the window and offered them a ride. Grateful for the unexpected kindness, Jake and Ryan eagerly accepted the offer and climbed into the back seat. As they settled in, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about their rescuer. His eyes seemed to gleam with an unsettling intensity, and his smile never quite reached his eyes. Ignoring their unease, they focused on the road ahead. But as the miles passed by, a sense of dread settled over them. The driver's conversation grew increasingly strange, his questions probing and invasive. They exchanged uneasy glances, silently wondering if they had made a mistake accepting the ride. Suddenly, the car veered off the main road onto a narrow, winding path through the woods. Jake and Ryan exchanged panicked looks, their hearts pounding in their chests. They demanded to know where they were going, but the driver remained silent, his grip on the steering wheel tightening. As the car plunged deeper into the darkness of the forest, Jake and Ryan's fear reached a fever pitch. They knew they had to escape, but the doors were locked, and the windows wouldn't budge. Frantic, they pounded on the windows, screaming for help, but their cries were swallowed by the howling wind. Just when they thought all hope was lost, the car screeched to a sudden halt. The driver turned to them, his smile twisted into a sinister grin. "Welcome to your final destination," he whispered, his voice chillingly calm. With a surge of adrenaline, Jake and Ryan kicked open the doors and bolted into the night, their lungs burning with exertion. Behind them, they heard the driver's laughter echoing through the trees, sending shivers down their spines. They ran until they could run no more, collapsing on the damp forest floor, their bodies trembling with fear and exhaustion. And as they huddled together in the darkness, they knew they would never forget the terror of that fateful ride. His name was Alex, a young man who had to walk through the old and eerie streets of his neighborhood every day on his way home from school. One day, after leaving school, he decided to take a shortcut, veering off his usual path to explore a quicker route. Little did he know, he was about to embark on a journey filled with darkness and terror. As he ventured further into the unfamiliar streets, he noticed the surroundings growing progressively darker and quieter. Suddenly, a strange creak pierced the silence, sending shivers down Alex's spine. He quickened his pace, trying to shake off the feeling of unease, but an ominous presence lingered in the air. Taking a deep breath, he scanned his surroundings carefully and caught sight of a shadowy figure approaching him. In the darkness, an indistinct silhouette was drawing nearer. Alex recoiled with apprehension, but the figure continued to advance. Finally, a street lamp illuminated the figure's face, and Alex's heart skipped a beat. It was a face he recognized all too well, his own reflection. Relief washed over him momentarily, but then he felt something collide with his face. The street lamp flickered and went out, plunging Alex into darkness as he held his breath, panic seizing him. He began to run, but with each step, the figure persisted, closing in on him relentlessly. Exhausted, Alex stopped running and took a moment to catch his breath. As he looked around, he noticed countless shadows converging on him in the darkness. It was then that he realized the chilling truth. The figure was not the only thing following him. His deepest fears had come to life. Suddenly, the shadows merged into one, enveloping him completely. Alex was consumed by darkness, lost forever in the depths of his own terror.